Hi, this is Christopher Smith. I'm the publisher of the American Cannabis Report, and I'm so pleased today to have Dr. Bridget Williams. She is the owner of Green Harvest Health in Ohio and also the author of a new book called Courage in Cannabis about people whose lives have been changed by cannabis. Dr. Williams, it's great to have you today.
Thank you, Christopher. I appreciate it.
And where am I finding you?
I am in my office in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, perfect. So what I wanted to talk about today was what I was excited to talk about today was your book, Courage in Cannabis, which was sent to me by one of the contributors or one of the people you covered, I guess, in the story, a young man named Broderick Randall,
Yes.
who's in Ohio as well. But before that, I find you very, very interesting. And one of the reasons I want to talk to you because there are so few Western trained medical doctors who are using cannabis as part of their practice.
Mhm.
And there's a huge sort of imbalance, right? We have medical marijuana laws all across the country in 38 states, and yet doctors are not being trained. We know about the endocannabinoid system and the other things that medical professionals have learned and scientists have learned about cannabis, but there's not as much training. So a person like you who ends up with medical, as an MD and also as a cannabis practitioner is kind of a strange hybrid. So I'm curious about how you got started, or how you kind of, did you come over, I guess? Did you kind of migrate over or something? How did you get here?
Yeah, so it was a patient that I met probably 15 or more years ago now, that started asking me about cannabis to make a long story short. And, I'm a Reagan kid. Nancy said no. And,
Right.
I hear that my brain was going to fry like an egg and, all of that stuff through the 80s. And I grew up in Detroit during the war on drugs. And so my view of cannabis at that time was that it was a drug. And I thought, what could she possibly be asking me about? But she was an established woman. She had just finished her treatment for breast cancer and she was diabetic. And like all my patients, I looked it up, whatever they asked me, I look it up because they're asking for a medical opinion. And so I wanted to be able to provide that. The big surprise was the information that I found even back then about what cannabis could do medicinally. Did not expect that at all. And so I really believe.
May I interrupt? What was there any information at all, or was there nothing?
There was definitely, it was anecdotal. Some of it was research from other countries, but there was information there. And more information than I typically would find when people were asking me about other holistic practices. So this was really intriguing to me. And like I said, I had a lot of faith in her and her journey. And I think I've always been interested in the patient's story, understanding them, giving very much individualized patient care. And a lot of the work that I was doing at that time was kind of behind the scenes. I was helping patients get off of medications. So I think I was already leaning towards something that was a little bit more unique already. So when I learned about cannabis, I said, let's take a look at this. Let's try. And she was making edibles, she was smoking. I was reading feverishly anything I could about titration and dosing and anything that I could find. And so I was really there supporting her as she educated me. And I saw change in front of my eyes. I saw her blood sugars normalizing, her sleep was better, her stress was better. She was more everything was changing. Really? And so much different than anything I would have anticipated if you asked me about cannabis. And so that was my entry point. When it became legal in Ohio, like I said, about 15 years later, I knew I wanted to be a part of it.
And this was the story the anecdote you mentioned in the book about Renee, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so this just, if I remember you got your ND at Michigan State. Did I read that correctly? See? Yeah. Did my homework. So you're a Western trained doctor all the way down the line. You're a good girl, and you're no drugs and all this, and all of a sudden your whole life takes a turn.
I was drawn because I knew my patients were unhappy. And to be honest, early in my career, I was unhappy too, way too early, that I
Okay.
felt like my background's in psychology. I went to University of Michigan with a psych degree, decided to go into medicine. And I thought what we were doing with these 15-minute visits, that everything was really based on algorithms. Don't get me wrong, I'm total evidence-based medicine without doubt, but I felt like my patients were begging for something different, and I was looking for something different. I felt like I knew more than what you could provide in a pharmaceutical med in 10-minute visits. And to be honest, as a family doctor, definitely at that time, my approach was, or the basic model was diagnosis pill. You don't like the pill, here's another pill. You have side effects, here's another one. And then you're on to the next room. And it didn't feel like that's what I was supposed to be doing.
They say that, well, cynical people say that big pharma doesn't have patients, they have customers.
This is true. Yeah, I would agree
It
with
feels
that.
like that.
Yeah. And I think we have leaned away from the art of medicine and we've turned into pharmaceutical medicine, because for all that we know and all that we learn, the focus is, oh, here's your diagnosis, there's a pill for that. And that is, there's not a lot of faith in life efforts to change your life patterns and to live differently and to listen to the patient and how they perceive wellness. There's not a lot spent in that space, at least not from the medical physician standpoint, because you've only got maybe a 10-minute visit after the patient checks in, right? So I was frustrated. I already knew that something didn't feel right. And when this whole thing came up with cannabis, I was really, really intrigued. And I felt like if there's this medical information out there, why wasn't I told anything about cannabis at all? I think the one thing we learned in medical school or residency was that, you know, it's addictive and men are gonna get gynecomastia, and which are basically man boobs, to be totally direct. And
Is that what it says in the literature, that that's what cannabis will cause?
given at that time. And so that was it. That's all I really knew about cannabis at all. So, and of course, at the time you take the sources that you're given and, you know, you kind of go with it. So to see that there was so much more possible was really mind blowing to me.
Yeah, it's remarkable that the advances and yet the strange sort of sequestration of information and data. You know, it's a very strange sort of a hide the peanut kind of a game or something. It's like 3-card money, it feels like, or something.
It is, yeah. I mean, we say that about everything that we learn, right? That we particularly as Americans, we believe that we're given all the information, but in reality, we've seen that as far as how history books are written, how the information that we're fed just on a daily basis, it's filtered and constructed to what we're supposed to know. And when you really consider that there's so much more, it does make you kind of hungry to see something different.
Yeah, cannabis is really the kind of the wild beast that's sort of gotten out. You know, it's got all sorts of secrets and it's out on the countryside now, you know, and people are trying to track it down.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, how did you find all of the people that are in your book? I'm going to hold up the book again. How did you find or locate, identify all of these folks? Did they find you? How they all come together?
Absolutely. A little bit of all of that. I kind of did, as everybody, I guess, did a search on social media and did a call for authors. There were certain people that I knew they had a good story, so I wanted them in the book. I did kind of a call out to different people I knew in the industry and saying, hey, do you know anybody? So there was one person that was in the book. I thought I met him at a conference and he was like, you know what, there's someone so much better with a better story. And he gave his spot to her. So it's a really, everybody in there is who's supposed to be there.
I think so. No, I was there's one woman that I've read a lot about, Franny Tacey, from North Carolina. And her story is so interesting. And she seems like, I mean, even the way that she starts her story in your book, which is I was born in a tornado.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and her mother, like, you know, sort of making a break for the hospital at the last possible minute with a tornado overhead kind of thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
she seems like quite a force of nature.
Oh,
Go ahead. Sorry.
no, she is. She's fabulous, and there's so much to take from her story and just from her whole experiences.
Yes, and the fellow that I mentioned earlier, I spoke with him also, Broderick Randall. I found him to be incredibly compelling and very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so he's local here in Ohio, and I'm trying to think how I met Broderick originally, but the one time that it really stuck, we were doing a webinar together. You know, this is, you know, during Zoom, so everything, or during the pandemic, so everything's on Zoom. And he was telling a story about sickle cell, and he holds up, I swear, almost like this size, he holds up this ball of the bracelets that you get when you're going to the ER, and ones that he's been saving whole life. And when he holds up this massive ball of these bracelets, like, I had chills. And from that moment, I was like, I need to know more about this guy and his experience and how he's overcome. So I never forget that moment when he, you know, picked that up, and just blew my mind.
And he's got a sister too, who also has sickle cell, but has not treated, I think, with cannabis, right? And so his quality of life, let's say, has really gone like this, and hers has not. So it's really an interesting sort of case to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
And you also had a woman, Dr. She's also a doctor, I believe, Jennifer
Anderson.
Jennifer Anderson, whose child, I think, had epilepsy, if I'm not mistaken, or a seizure disorder, pardon me.
Yes. And so it's funny, I'm trying to remember how I know everyone. I met her during a webinar series as well, was really compelled story. And gosh, and she has so much tenacity and fight in her. And the way she got, you know, everyone has these really inspiring cannabis stories, but they're inspiring because of the people behind them. Like, she's absolutely amazing and so intelligent and such an advocate for her patients. And so she's in Canada, actually. So
okay. And her story, just for people hopefully will read your book, she's a medical doctor, an emergency room doctor, as a matter of fact, got pregnant, had twins, and the way that twins were developing, one was getting all the nutrients basically and all the blood, and the other was not. They were both born, however, alive, and the smaller one really suffered. And she finally turned to CBD medicine after trying everything else, you know, for this poor little thing who, you know, was having seizures and everything, and witnessed the miracle right before her eyes, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And he continues to do so well. She shared pictures of this, I guess maybe in January or what have you, where he went skiing.
Oh, come on. Really?
Yeah. I mean, you know, she's so excited, and I know that she feels blessed, but when I saw those pictures, I was just overwhelmed. I mean, she's definitely a special person. And and so, like I said, such an advocate for her patients as well.
That's my own personal journey in cannabis really started with, I don't have a child who's afflicted, but when I first started in the industry, it was when there was a lot of pushback against cannabis by the legislators in Washington. And they were saying, well, you know, this is not medicine and it's illegal, and we're going to come down on you. And I thought of all those parents who had children like that, who were, I mean, these poor little kids, you know, innocent little kids. And the big bad wolf from Washington was going to shut it down and was going to put these people in jail and separate family. I mean, it was completely awful, draconian kind of stuff. And it was when I really became an advocate, created the American Cannabis Report, really to try to put out those kind of stories, to just say, we just can't allow this to happen in America. We can't allow this to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. And it's unfortunate that, you know, sometimes people need to know someone, and this isn't just for the government. Many times people need to know someone to really take in, to see change, right? That they might hear a story, they see stuff on the news, but when they really know someone that has experienced some of these things that we're talking about, that's when their minds start to change. And the book was really meant to do that. It's inspired, it's educational stories that I even in my own like speaking engagements and education opportunities, I don't really try to convince people to use cannabis. I want them to understand it, and they might see it is for them, they might see it's not for them, but I hope that they stop judging their nephew, their child, their neighbor who does choose to use it, just by gaining a little bit more understanding.
The stigma is still such a major part of our lives, isn't it? It's just, I hate to, it's one of those things where I hate to admit it, but the propaganda campaign against cannabis was an absolute masterpiece in terms of propaganda. It was incredibly powerful.
Yes, yeah.
But I do feel also that it is just a story, though it's just a mythology that was created by people. And so what our job is, I feel, is to break down that mythology and to get back to the place where we help people. And it seems like that's very much what you're trying to do as well.
I think the stigma was something that really, really hit me from day one about what we're living with. And so when I first started patients, and I'm, providing a medical cannabis card and doing some education, what have you, and I would hand that card over to the patient, and I had big, burly, grown men with tears. And I was like, what is going on, right? Yeah. And then to learn of their stories, to learn how it helped them, but it was illegal, to learn of their shame and their guilt. Women that wanted to be involved in church, but were terrified that if I smell like cannabis, they're going to kick me out of church and I'm going to be, the ruin of my community. And to see the liberation that they felt, that now I have a card, I don't need to hide this from my child anymore. I don't have to hide it from, people in my neighborhood anymore. Like, I'm a real patient with real medicine. That really, really drew me in. And so initially I started writing down some of these stories because I just felt like they were so compelling. Yeah. An opportunity to possibly publish them. And I stopped because I felt like, well, they're not my story. I mean, they're not, I didn't write, these aren't my experience. I have an experience with the patient, but their story is not my experience, right? So I put it off for a while. And when I learned about the process of creating an anthology where they write their own stories and finding benefit from their own stories, right? That's what I wanted to do. So we found, like I said, these 18 people. And so you can buy the books directly from each author, as well as our, Amazon, and we're now on Audible, which is very exciting.
Nice.
Because everyone doesn't read, right? So and a lot of people commute. So it provides an opportunity for people to listen to it.
And you told me also, Doctor, that you have perhaps a second book in the works, or you're thinking about how to think about it. Tell me about what's coming up.
Absolutely. So my goal from day one was to create a series, because not only do I want to get these stories documented, but if we don't, within about 2 generations or so, people are going to be like, what was the big deal anyhow? They'll be going up to their regular CVS drugstore and getting their cannabinoid combination and going about their business, and won't understand what people experience in this very unique period of time. So I want to be able to record these stories. During, I guess, my high school, college years, I loved Chicken Soup for the Soul. I love inspiring stories that really kind of engage you and motivate you. And so I knew from day one that I wanted Courage in Cannabis to really be a series where people can look back and look at stories that they relate to. And what's interesting about our book is that not only does it provide the story, but you have the ability to contact every author. So if something if something is meaningful to you, you can reach out to each author and have a conversation with them directly, because I want to humanize and personalize what the cannabis experience is all about.
Yeah, I think that's a, I think I noticed that too in each, the way that the book is laid out is each person tells their story, and then there's right afterwards sort of an about the author section, with the email address, etc. So yeah, I think that's an incredible little feature. And I love the idea that you're really assembling the stories for our time.
Yes, yes.
Tell me now, I've also read, not only do you have a list of accomplishments on your website that sort of goes on to the second page because there are so many, but one I wanted to talk about particularly, I think, which I think you're proud of, is Green Harvest Health.
Yes, yes. So it all really starts there. Kind of continuing my own story, when cannabis did become legal, medicinal cannabis in Ohio, I knew I wanted to be a part of it based on my past experience. I got certified to recommend, which is how we outline it here, and got the opportunity to work at a card clinic, which I thought was a decent idea. The problem is that their response to my interest was, look, we just do cards. We're cards for cash. We don't care what you know. We don't educate. We don't. And I was like, that's the opposite of what I want.
Yeah.
So I felt like after almost 20 years at the Cleveland Clinic, and I had dotted all my I's and crossed my T's and been a good girl, you know, all those good things, I really was ready to branch out and really create an experience that my patients have been asking for all those years. Okay. So I'm certified as a cannabis educator and coach, and also a life coach, because I realized what was unique about that period of time when I was helping patients get off of meds, because I was, instead of just doing it during the regular office visit, I was scheduling them during my lunch hour and at the very end of the day. So I had time, and I knew I wanted to create a different experience. And so I became a life coach, you know, cannabis educator, and then created Green Harvest Health. And so we're the only life coaching and medical cannabis office. We're adding new modalities and experiences like IV infusion. And we create a place where your visits are at least half an hour to 45 minutes. Most visits are even longer. And so we do attract an older population, a more elderly, like a more chronically ill population. People need, families need more assistance. So I rarely see, you know, I have colleagues that talk about, you know, the person that comes in to try to just get a card and get high type. I don't really see a lot of that, because if that's your interest, you're probably not sitting with me for an hour talking about it. So
no. Yeah. Right. I'm really curious to hear you say that many of your patients are older. It's occurred to me that older people, I mean, my mother's 85, you know, for example, so she's my sort of template for an older person. And, you know, things start to hurt, you know, feet hurt or something, this and that. There's neurological things that have sort of built up over years, you know, and she's one of those sort of Midwestern kind of people who's like, are you still in that industry? Like, she won't, you know, she kind of can't really bring herself to actually say it. And I keep telling her that, you know, eventually she's going to call me because she's going to need some, right? She's going to want some. So I'll, you know my number, Mom, you know, whenever that time comes. But I'm curious about older people. Is it an even bigger hurdle for them to jump, or are they just so eager to get something that works that they're like, I don't care about cannabis or sand. I don't care. Just give me something that helps it.
I think both of those. I would say that even the hurdle over accepting the fact that they're using marijuana itself, right. I see that at a lot of age groups, not just my older population. But I definitely, it you know, they propaganda just like everybody else, right?
Right.
And so I do see a lot of people that are like, I could care less what it is. I just want to get better. I have so many patients of all age groups that are so terrified of opioids right now that they are, you know, can't their next best option. Okay. I definitely still have a couple of patients that still express to me, I can't believe I'm doing it. Helps, it works, but I can't believe I'm doing it. And my typically to help them understand that this isn't about cannabis, weed, marijuana, whatever you want to call it. This is about cannabis medicine. And so we in cannabinoids are not just in cannabis. And so like, for instance, one of my patients just the other day, I said, this same product that you were using for your anxiety and your pain could actually have come from orange peels, not at all from cannabis. It just, it's a lot cheaper coming from cannabis than if you had to try to extract and create this from orange peels, but it could have come from orange peels. And she was so blown away. And so she was like, yeah, that makes me feel better. This isn't about cannabis. This is about cannabinoids.
Right.
And
good.
Yeah. So I think
well, there's the other big piece, and I'm sure it sounds, you're saying everything, but the education really is just so important, right? The more that we can share information with people, I think is so important. And the more that we can just simply, I guess this is one of the things that you do as well, as you're sort of almost on a speaking tour almost, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just trying to help people understand.
Absolutely. So I spend a great deal of my time traveling, doing education. I speak about different aspects of medicine and cannabis and CBD, but also conversations business to business about building out what you're doing and how to do it with integrity and ethics, right? And I really call my talks medical motivational talks, because I talk about the subject, but I talk about it in a way that's much more relatable. And I guess that goes right back to that psychology and that life coaching background, that I try to make it relatable and let people leave inspired with a call to action, so that I know the research as well as anyone else, and I could give you all the values and randomized trials and what have you. And I do that, but I spend more of my time trying to speak to a way that really connects with people than just providing charts that impress people, I guess.
Sure. Well, it's also, I mean, one of the great things about this era of cannabis is that there's so many other options for people. You don't only have to smoke, right? There's so many other ways to get your cannabinoids, whether they're through edibles or tinctures, or whatever that are really low impact, very simple, and not secret, but personal anyway. You don't come in a cloud, you don't come in smelling like it, right? Like you had a hot box in your car. Right before you come into church, and everyone goes, "Uh-oh," right? They're right, but there's so many ways where you can get the benefit without any of that other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, capsules are incredibly popular right now.
Absolutely.
And that's one thing that a lot of patients don't consider, that if you like traditional pharmaceutical ways of taking meds, that's what you're comfortable with, that's what you're familiar with, then you can do that with cannabis as well. And so we actually are just launching a kind of combination capsule called Vitality, which is a combination of cannabinoids and B6 and B12, really to kind of boost your immune system. And, definitely, COVID's always on the horizon, right? We're away, but it's always right there. And so it just kind of helps protect your immune system a little bit and give you a boost. So, and it's a pill, it's a capsule.
Nice and easy. My first experience with a Western trained medical doctor like yourself, who was also prescribing cannabinoid medicine, was a guy named Dr. Philip Blair. I met him at a conference, as a matter of fact, but he was working with another company that does that was making CBD products, and he had a very interesting way of solving problems, which it sounds a little bit like the way you think about things. Where, I mean, it seems to, in my layperson's head, I'm thinking like there's cancer and there's diabetes and there's epilepsy, let's just say. And the way he would think about these things is actually with regard to symptoms. So rather than kind of I'm going to try to solve cancer, let's say, he would look at it this way and say, I'm trying to solve inflammation. And so that opens up everything in a wholly different way, right? Where inflammation occurs in diabetic patients, inflammation occurs with an injury. I'm not trying to tell you anything, but it seems like that alternative, just that different perspective, that different mode of sort of attacking the problem opened up a whole new way of treating people's issues for him. And I don't know if that was maybe similar to your experience as well.
Well, I found that a lot of what we do in medicine is after the diagnosis, right?
Right.
Talk a little bit about how to, pull back, and hopefully you won't get there, and maybe take this test. But we really don't talk enough, I feel, about how to really do great preventive care in the first place, right?
Oh, okay, right.
And again, the preventive care is focused on the diseases. And my approach is focusing simply on wellness. So instead of looking at from the negative, how do you boost your wellness so that we're not that worried about the disease, right? And I feel like cannabis can be a great option in that.
I really like the way you're describing. It's very similar, and I love to hear you say that we're not trying to treat a particular diagnosis, but actually trying to treat the whole person.
Yeah.
Treat their whole experience. And also it sounds like you do quite with your psychiatry background, right? So you're really working on the whole person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's
so
what people,
I don't know. So you're a different kind of doctor. So that seems to be pretty easy to say.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that my peers probably say the same thing a little bit differently.
Oh, well, they're jealous. That's actually the truth.
No, but I feel like what I provide, obviously I'm invested in this, but I literally provide what my patients ask for.
Right.
Like I'm listening to what their experiences are. And really a lot, like, yes, there's a lot of education and background and science that goes into that. But the wealth of knowledge of physicians is that you have this massive amount of experiences from patients. Right. So it's not like, oh, I know my neighbor and 5 other people. I know thousands of people over the years that have had experiences. Right. Mm. And so that is a motivator for me. What are they telling me? How are they responding to me? How are they responding to this framework that we've created? Does it meet their needs? And Green Harvest Health is a reflection of patients wanting their needs met in a different way. And that out even more over time.
I think that's so interesting because again, you're flipping the paradigm that people think about when they think about medical doctors. It's you're in the Western medical sort of system. You've been trained in a Western methodologies, let's say, and you use Western pharmaceutical medicines as solutions to problems, and you're flipping it around actually to say my only source of information is not the sort of medical industry, let's say, but it's actually the other, which is it's completely the opposite, which is my source of information is the patients themselves. And that's how we're learning.
Yeah. So I definitely feel like patients know their body. I can give you all the data in the world, but I can never look at a person and say, oh, look, the numbers are great. You're healthy. And when they say, but I don't feel it. And I feel like traditional medicine tells you, well, if the numbers are good, then you're good. And I'll see you later. And we need to pay more attention to the patient that says, no, something doesn't feel right. Or I know my body. I know I feel different. We don't give that enough credence. Right. And so what I try to do is pay attention to the details. And you can't do that in 15 minutes. Right. And note, I still have the quick patients and, the in and out and pretty simple, but there's a huge population of people that we're missing that deserve good quality care and have honestly a story to tell in the process. I'm hoping to be a part of making people's story a positive ending is what I'm hoping, but yeah, so that's the approach.
That's great. Dr. Williams, you have so many different things going on. Like I said, your list of accomplishments is so long. So I'm sure you have 97 different things pulling on your attention. And I so appreciate your time today. Is there anything that I perhaps forgot to ask or didn't know to ask or anything else you would like to talk about before we wrap it up today?
Yeah. So I'm really in book mode right now, but people can always learn more about Courage in Cannabis by going to courageincannabis.com. You'll see all the authors listed, and some of the authors have a way for you to buy the book directly from them. And also checking it out on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, and Audible, which we're, really excited about. And so we'll be looking for new authors probably in the fall. And so if you are interested in sharing your story, when you go to COURAGEInCANNABIS.com, there's a way for you to leave a message and we'll send you a form. And I'm excited about who these new people might be.
Fantastic. Well, I so appreciate your time, Dr. Williams. Thank you so much, and good luck with the next book project. I'm sure we'll hear more about it. I'll keep paying attention to you and all the websites and seeing what you're doing. And maybe when the next book comes around, you'll come back on and we'll talk about that one.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Williams. You take care. Bye-bye. I want to say thank you again to Dr. Bridget Williams for spending so much time with us today. It was fantastic to get to know her. She's the author of Courage in Cannabis, which is a new book about people whose lives have been changed by cannabis. She is a medical doctor in Ohio and also the owner of Green Harvest Health. Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. I want to remind all of our viewers to like, share, and subscribe, and also give a big shout out to the good folks at Pro Cannabis Media, Dan, Isabel, and of course, the inimitable Jimmy Young. Thanks very much.